presenter for the conference, Dr. Brian Jenks. And if you're ready, we're ready. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Brian Jenks.
My name is Brian Jenks, weed scientist with North Dakota State University. I'm not in Fargo on campus. I'm at a research center in Northwest North Dakota in Minot. And we are dealing with a weed that I consider our Palmer amaranth. You've probably heard of Palmer amaranth. It's a serious weed in many parts of the U.S. And the reason why it's such a big issue is because it's very prone to develop resistance. And now we're seeing some similar things with Kochia. Okay, just a bit of a disclaimer. I've attempted to use Canadian trade names and rates in mils per acre. Hopefully I got them right. I don't profess to know all the differences in labels between the US and Canada, and some of them are quite different. Especially Sencor, notice that one's quite different. Some products that I talk about may have the same name but differ in herbicide concentration. Some products I discuss may not be labeled in Canada or the US, and some information is presented as research, not as a recommendation. Okay, this is kind of a worst case scenario for Kochia. This is a scenario where a grower for multiple years tried growing Roundup Ready crops year after year. Fortunately, this doesn't happen very often, but this is the result of overusing a product. And I ask you the question, can you identify the crop? And down in there somewhere in here is a few soybean plants. Okay, I just want to talk about for a little bit here some of the herbicides used to control Kochia historically. Our group 2 herbicides like Ally Express, Refine, etc. We have used those for years, but now for decades, we really don't rely on these herbicides to control Kochia. We know that essentially 100% or close to it of the Kochia population is resistant to these herbicides. Group 3s like Edge and Treflan, we don't use a lot of them, a lot of Edge or Treflan anymore in North Dakota, primarily because, well, at least the western 2/3 of the state is no-till, and so we don't really use these in no-till. The exception might be a little bit of Edge that's still used in the fall as granules in front of lentils. But I know canola is very important to you in Canada. It's important to us here in North Dakota as well. And I'm actually encouraging growers to still consider using Edge in canola where possible. And the primary reason for that is in North Dakota, about 80% of our canola is Liberty Link. I'm guessing that in Canada, I don't know what the percentage is, but I imagine it's pretty high too. But we are putting such selection pressure on Liberty. I'm very concerned about losing Liberty to resistance. We rely on Liberty now so much in canola and as well in soybean that I'm concerned that there is too much selection pressure there. And if we could use some Edge once in a while to reduce some of the weed populations and take some of that selection pressure off, that would be fantastic. Now, we know that Edge doesn't provide 90 or 100% control, but I estimate at least 60 to 80% control, and that will take some pressure off of Liberty. Our group 4s, 2,4-D, 2,4-D really doesn't control Kochia for us. We don't rely on it. Fluroxapyr. Fluroxapyr has been a main product for us the last 20, 25 years. However, we're noticing a trend where we're starting to see, instead of 90% control like we used to see 20 years ago, we're really only seeing about 70% control average, probably 60 to 80, somewhere in there. And so I'm encouraging growers to not just rely on fluroxapyr containing products. We should have other products in the mix if possible, and I'll discuss that more in a bit. Dicamba. We use dicamba Some growers use dicamba in front of wheat. Yes, there's a label restriction. So many days you have to wait after spraying dicamba, but we do have quite a few growers that still use that in front of wheat. We have been using it in soybeans, in front of in dicamba soybeans. And you may have heard that we just had a federal judge vacate those registrations, so we're dealing with that. But dicamba has been a product that has been very helpful for us, not only with kochia but other weeds. But unfortunately, though, we are starting to see some populations of kochia that have some tolerance to dicamba. Group 5, atrazine. I think you might have a little bit of corn there, not sure, but we do use atrazine for corn, and we do recommend it in corn. I'll go down here to a synergism that we see with Armazon, a group 27 like Armazon plus atrazine, that tank mix together, those two products together, we see very good kochia control, much better than either product alone. So we certainly use atrazine, and we don't have to use that much. You know, we use just enough to help control the weed, but not have real serious carryover the following year. Sencor, for us, it's labeled in front of soybeans, peas, and lentils. It's not labeled for us in front of chickpeas, but I am encouraging our growers to use Sencor more. And as I talk to growers, we don't have a lot of growers using Sencor, and I think we need to. But the caveat there that I stress is Sencor can help you, but you have to know your soil characteristics, or you could run into some challenges. Obviously, Sencor is very sensitive to pH, organic matter, and soil texture. And so we have to know what those are and apply the right rate according to our soil characteristics. With our group 6 herbicides like Basagran, Bromoxynil, and Tough, Basagran, most people don't really consider Basagran as a kochia product. And on 3 or 4 inch kochia, yeah, it isn't a product for 3 or 4 inch kochia. You get suppression. But we have seen that where we spray small kochia, like 1 inch kochia, you spray 1 inch kochia 1 week, come back a week later, spray it again, we get up to 90% control. That's something to consider. Bromoxynil, we rely on Bromoxynil a lot as different partners in our wheat crops, as well as in flax. We rely on Bromoxynil, but usually it's not sprayed by itself. And that's one of the things I stress is I really would not want to see Bromoxynil sprayed by itself. Tough was just brought back to the market for chickpeas, and I didn't check this label, but a couple of years ago they added a Tough label for lentil, and I don't know how. I know there's more lentils, I think, in Saskatchewan than Alberta, but you really got to be careful in lentil. I'm telling growers that before you spray Tough in lentil, give me a call. We need to have a discussion about that. Roundup or glyphosate. We estimate probably at least 80% of our kochia in the state is glyphosate resistant. Some people say 60, some people say 100, but I'd say 80% is a good average. Liberty, I mentioned, we use in front of, or we use a lot in soybean and canola. Zidua is a product that we've started using a little bit of. I think from some of my discussions with colleagues in Canada, I think you might use it more than we do. I don't have a great feel and a lot of experience with it, how it controls kochia. I will share some information about that. So I want to talk now about group 14s, because we rely significantly on group 14s, and so do you in Canada. AIM and Heat, we've been using those products in burn downs for many years, and maybe a little bit of pyroflufen and Insight, but primarily AIM and Heat for a foliar burn down. And then we've also got the authority products or Valterra, which we rely more on soil applied residual herbicide, not necessarily foliar control, but through root uptake. I'm going to show you this this group 14 classification because this is important. What we're going to see in a few slides is that this class of herbicides right here, the diphenyl ethers, Flexstar, Cobra, Ultra Blazer. I don't think you have Cobra, but I think you do have Flexstar and Ultra Blazer in Canada. These products, for whatever reason, are not showing the resistance that we're seeing with some of the other products. Okay, so it was probably back in 2020, 2021 when we were looking at some research plots and we were suspecting the possibility of resistance to our group 14s, where aim or aim or heat, gotta get my trade names right. Aim or heat were not working like they had used to in the past, and so we suspected resistance, but it wasn't until we collected kochia in 2022 at these locations indicated here to where we collected samples at the end of the year, got the seed, and we tested them in the greenhouse. Unbeknownst to me, at the same time, there was a sample collected up in Saskatchewan. And then we suspected down here in South Dakota that there could be resistance. There was several samples collected here from this Rugby to Carrington area where resistance was also suspected. And so we confirmed in the greenhouse, this is AIM at 1 and 2x rates, 1x being 30 mils per acre. This is our susceptible check at 1x rate. Here's our 2x rate. And then these samples from these 4 locations, the kochia was not controlled by AIM. And then very similar pictures this is with heat at 1 and 2x rates. Again, 1x being 30 mils, not controlling the kochia. And I have been saying for years, if we ever get resistance to group 14s, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So we asked the question, what if we increase the rate? Instead of just going 1 and 2x rates, what if we increase the rate? Here we went up to 16x and still didn't control the kochia. In another study, one of my colleagues went up to 100x and still did not control the kochia. Okay, so here we see this is heat, Insight, pyroflufen, and AIM are foliar herbicides for burn down. And then here is the Ultra Blazer, Flexstar, Cobra. Those are the 3 diphenyl ethers I mentioned earlier. For whatever reason, those 3 group 14s appear to still have activity on this kochia. In contrast, Authority and Valterra do provide some suppression, but it's suppression at best. Okay, so the big question then is, it appears like we've lost, in some of these populations, we lost the foliar control with these group 14s. Well, what about the soil applied group 14s like Authority and Valterra? So we're not, I'm talking now root uptake, not foliar control. So in this study, we had a susceptible check. This is our untreated. This is Authority at a 1x rate, which would be 118 mils, and Valterra at 1x 90 mils. So 1 and 2x rates of each of those, Authority and Valterra, with 4 replications here. And in this case, you see that the kochia is controlled with Authority or Valterra with this susceptible check. But then we look at one of the suspected resistant locations, and it doesn't look as pretty. Here's Authority at 1 and 2x rates and Valterra and at the 1 and 2x rates. Then you look across the replications, it looks fairly consistent. And so obviously we're losing some control here from what we normally expect. Okay, in this slide, I took several of the locations. Here's Mott, Mandan, Berthold, Minot, a couple locations from Mohall compared to our susceptible check. This group right here is Valterra. This group is Authority, and this is our untreated down here. So these numbers over here, or these locations, correspond to the numbers going across the top. And so number 7 here is our susceptible check. And you can see our susceptible check, the Kochia is being controlled with the Valterra as well as the Authority. And then it's the Valterra that doesn't look very good, and we have kind of an intermediate response with the Authority. This is very concerning because we use Authority in multiple crops: soybean, sunflower, safflower, flax. The Authority is a workhorse for us. Valterra, we have been using Valterra a lot recently as a fall application. It's not labeled in the spring, except for only a couple of crops, and so it's been primarily used as a fall application to control winter annuals as well as early spring emerging kochia. And so this is a huge blow to us if we start to see this over wide locations. So I wanted to see in this trial, I wanted to get an idea of what does Zidua bring to the table. So here I have Valterra by itself, Zidua by itself, and then Fierce, which is a combination of Valterra and Zidua. I have 2 susceptible checks. Here's susceptible check 2, down here's susceptible check 1, our 2 suspected resistant populations, Minot and Mohall. So these 4 pots here represent our susceptible check 2 with Valterra. Looks like it's being controlled quite well. The Minot sample looks pretty close to the untreated. The Mohall sample the same. And then our susceptible check 1, again, controls very good. How about Zidua by itself? Well, the Zidua by itself looks fairly consistent across all of the populations, but you wouldn't necessarily call it control, you'd call it suppression. And so that's my experience. I think we are getting suppression from Zidua. I don't think we would necessarily rely on it as a herbicide that's going to provide complete control. It's going to be suppression. However, where we had Fierce, the 2 products together, our susceptible check, both susceptible checks look very good. And even though we've got some resistance to Valterra here, putting the 2 together still look maybe just a little bit better than Zidua by itself. Okay, I asked the question, any good news? Well, in Canada, I think this product became available last year. I don't know if it was labeled in time for use, but On Deck, Corteva product will control kochia, and uniquely resistant foxtail and wheat. It contains tolpyrrolate plus bromoxynil. What is unique about it is that so it's a group 26 or group 27 and 6, and then it does quite well on kochia, but you and we have resistant foxtail, group 1 and group 2 resistant foxtail. This is a group 27 that's controlling the foxtail here, and so it provides a different mode of action. And in our trials, it has looked very good. So that is one thing that will help us. Oxbow is another product that I think was recently labeled in Canada, or soon will be, dicloprop plus bromoxynil. Now I know you've had dicloprop for a few years now, but this is a new farm is bringing this to the market, combining the 2, dicloprop plus bromoxynil. This has looked quite good on kochia, especially when it's small. Now you've got a product in Canada that we do not. It is called Certitude. It's a combination of Armazon and bromoxynil. Right now it's labeled in front of canola only. I believe the company is looking at maybe expanding the use of this, but right, in my trials, this has looked very good on kochia in a spring burn down. And it's certainly something that we would consider looking at. Okay, so given this kochia situation, what we've had to do up to this point is collect seed at the end of the year, usually in October, and then test them in the greenhouse for resistance. But thanks to BASF, we did send some of these kochia samples to BASF, and they sent the seed over to their headquarters in Germany, and they were able to determine that that the kochia in these samples has a target site mutation, and they were able to identify that target site mutation. And so, with that information, here in the U.S., and I'm sure Canada will do the same thing, we have an organization called the National Agricultural Genotyping Center, and so they are developing a genetic test that where you can take a couple of leaves, stick it in an envelope, send it to the lab, and they will be able to tell you within a couple of weeks if the kochia that you have has this genetic mutation or not. Now, in all the samples that we sent over there from the 4 or 5 locations, each one of these had the same mutation. And so we are hoping that this test will be available in April or May. I think it could be a significant help to us to where you can send in a sample and you can know, within a couple of weeks if the kochia has this genetic mutation or not, rather than waiting till the end of the year. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here to post-emergence kochia control. And this is in wheat. And the trend that we're seeing, these 4 bars here, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are 4 different commercial products that have fluroxypyr as the primary herbicide to control kochia. There's really no other herbicide in the premix to control kochia. And I mentioned earlier, we're seeing about 70% control of kochia with our fluroxypyr products. However, this one right here, I think, is the same as this one, but this 3rd bar has bromoxynil in it. And several of these treatments also have bromoxynil or something like an Infinity FX that has 2 or 3 modes of action. And so this is why we're starting to see this across or in multiple locations across the state. And so we're recommending that growers look at least 2 modes of action in their wheat, such as here I show Enforcer D, and this is not a complete list. This is I just handpicked a few products. So this one has 2,4-D bromoxynil fluroxypyr. M just has MCPA with the bromoxynil fluroxypyr. Infinity FX has 3 modes of action, and a couple that I don't. You may have a similar product in Canada, I'm not sure, but betalimamp and Tylenol plus styrene, where we've got, again, primarily relying on bromoxynil fluroxypyr. In this one, we've got one other product by cyclopyrone to help us control kochia. And so we're emphasizing having at least 2 modes of action to help us there. Okay, I mentioned the on deck, which will be, I think you've got it labeled now, but it has looked very good for us. Here, I'm going to blow through this very fast because I've only got a few minutes left. But I want to emphasize, and I can't emphasize enough, the concept of small kochia. 3-inch kochia is what I'm telling growers to target. Not 4, not 5, 3-inch kochia. Because we consistently see much better control of kochia when we're targeting 3-inch. Here we got 6-inch kochia, and we're getting about 80% control. Or excuse me, I'm into getting the right column here. So we're getting 77, 82% control on this large kochia. With the foxtail Now, again, this is the on deck, which has the group 27, so we are getting better. We are getting some foxtail control there. But when we go down to smaller weeds, 1 to 2 inch weeds, our kochia is upper 90s for control. Our foxtail is mid to upper 80s. And then one more here, kochia was 1/2 to 4 inches, average of 1 inch. Our foxtail was 2 inches. Again, so we're seeing 90+% control of kochia and 90% control of green foxtail. The dicloprop product that I mentioned, the oxbow, of course, dicloprop is similar to 2,4-D, except you got this 1-methyl group here. And what I want to show here, this is about 4 years of work that we did looking at, we happen to have different size of kochia, 7, 4, 6, 1, 6, 3, and oxbow percent control here, dicloprop by itself, and bromoxynil by itself. So look at our control here on the large kochia, only 53 to 83. Look at the products individually, not good. Where we went to 4-inch kochia, 89 to 97, and then individually 80 to 86. Let's jump down here. 1-inch kochia, 90s. We go to 6-inch kochia. We seriously drop control again with 6-inch kochia. 3-inch kochia here is what I'm recommending. We see 93 to 97. Okay, I'm just going to say in general, for fall applications, we do rely on some of our herbicides to reduce our kochia population in the spring. We have used Valterra, we've primarily used Valterra in the fall to control kochia. Some people use a little bit of Authority, maybe a little bit of metribuzin, but not much. But what I'm telling growers is with the fall applications, especially with Valterra, don't put it on every acre. Obviously, you're never going to put it in front of canola. I know you guys grow a lot of canola. You never put that in front of canola, but in front of other crops, don't put it on every acre, because this is, we're concerned about developing resistance, and that's what we're seeing now. Maybe we used it too much. Okay, I'm going to blow through some slides here. Okay, I'm going to get down to here. Preventing and managing resistant weeds. We have to, I think we have to take the approach that we have to preserve the products that we have. We have to be good stewards. We can't expect that the companies are going to develop a new product. I just don't think it's going to happen. And unfortunately, we're starting to see enough resistance here that, it's a little spooky. And so we're going to have to not only rely on the herbicides, but maybe some crop rotations, other cultural control practices that we can use to help reduce the populations of kochia and other weeds that we have. Using our crop rotations. I hope nobody's going on 2-year rotations, canola wheat, canola wheat, canola wheat, and with that canola being Liberty every year. I think that's a recipe for a disaster. Using cool versus warm season crops, short versus long, fall versus spring, annual versus perennial where possible. Not relying solely on post products, but using residual products where possible, and using different modes of action, different tank mixes, labeled rates, labeled stages, and then where possible, different planting dates or row spacing, seeding rates, so that the weeds can adjust to what you're doing, and maybe even doing a little hand weeding if there's a big kochia plant out there, whatever weed it is. Maybe try and do a little bit of that. I know very few people are going to do that, but where we've tackled polymer amaranth and we've taken this zero tolerance approach, we've been able to keep it under control. Now, I know kochia is a different beast because of how it it spreads across the land and forms these mats. But we're gonna have to take some different approaches and not just rely solely on the herbicides. Okay, I've taken my 30 minutes. Hopefully I can take a couple of minutes for questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Jenks. Yes, we have time for questions. We will have to use the microphone, otherwise he won't be able to hear us. So anybody has a question, please raise your hand, and we will get the microphone to you. We have a lot of shy people here, Dr. Jenks.
Well, you're probably at the end of the meeting and people are ready to go home.
And we appreciate you putting up with the travel issues that you had, and you couldn't actually be here in person, so we would like to have seen you here.
Yeah, that was interesting.
We'll leave it at that. Oh, we have at least one question off Slido. Go ahead.
I know you skipped over the slides from Sencor. Could you quick give a recap on what you found with Sencor and lentils?
Okay. Here's my story with Sencor and lentils. You have to know your soil type, your pH, your organic matter. If you don't know that, you can run into some issues. For example, I say probably too risky. pH of 8, organic matter 1.6, sandy loam. Our label, and your label is different, our label says, and I interpret it as anything that has sandy in the label to not use it. It says do not use on, this is our label, not yours. It says don't use on coarse texture soils or sandy soils. And so I'm telling growers to be careful with these soils that have sand in the name. And then be careful with high pHs and lower organic matter. You know, in my area, where I have a pH of 6.5, organic matter 3.2, and a loam, I have no problem using Sencor and lentils or dry peas. But somebody that has this soil up here, and especially if you get a heavy rain right after, that's where you have to be careful.
Well, I guess not. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Jenks. We hope that maybe in the future you can actually come up and visit. So we hope to see you sometime. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yep.